So this is my first time speaking in a conference, and this is really impressive, although not much people here now, and that is great for me as well, as you can imagine. So with this talk, I basically aim to provide tips and tricks from my experience working with right-to-left languages. And I think everyone knows how to make Django work with multilingual, like a multilingual site, but not maybe not everyone with a right-to-left where everything needs to switch and everything needs to adapt for them to read and work with it properly. So I will address scalability, settings very briefly, because Django docs are great. Direction in text editors, characters encoding issues, especially with Python 2.7. And different system for calendars. For example, from my own experience, I work with, so my foundation work focused on Middle East countries and North Africa countries. And that means sometimes we need to work with Persian, and that is right to left, and they do have a different calendar. So all of that we're going to address in this talk. URL-based language, and finally some front-end tricks. I really hope this is helpful for you guys, and any feedback, questions, comments will be much appreciated. Okay, so a bit about me. As you said, I'm a UX designer and a self-made full-stack developer. So everything I learned for myself during 10 years coding, because I love coding, and the last 4 years working with Django, and that is a pleasure since I met Django. Yeah, my company is a Small Media Foundation. It's a non-profit based in London, providing research, training, technology, and in at-risk communities. Okay. So there we start. How many of you guys have worked with Django and right-to-left languages? Yeah, not that many. That's good. As very well stated in Django docs, translation depends on the target language, and formatting usually depends on the target country, and that is totally correct, right? Different calendar systems, so we really need to know what the target is, what the audience is, in order to address interface and problems for them. So there you go, plan. We need to know what the client wants. They usually don't know what they want, so we need to actually determine what they want, how many languages they're going to have now and in the future. That means your system needs to scale, obviously, and it needs to be ready to add more languages in the future, especially if they are right to left. Regarding the content, are the translations going to be linked? That means they are going to translate side by side, or they are going to be totally separated. That means we are going to have same model, but they can create, for example, a Persian article or an English article. So the answer to these questions determine the good approach that we need to choose on the site. Actually, having a multi-site with Django sites, that is going to solve some problems, that is going to cause another many problems. That means you're going to need to have different settings, and that is probably, in most of the cases, from my experience, a pain in the ass. That is because, for example, a recent project we had, it was a really huge, massive database that we needed to migrate, and we had 2 sites for Farsi and English, Persian and English, And in that case, running like 10 Django management commands was really a pain in the ass problem. So actually, you need to think, I'm not saying that the Django sites are good for different purposes, but you really need to know what you need, what your approach is, and what is the right solution for you according to your specifications of the project you are working on. We could consider having one language, one app that also works. That means removing Django sites, but having one language and one app, and select them with the URLs. That is a good approach. Or shall we consider a subdomain based, which is essentially the same, but just different settings for Nginx, for deployment, or using packages like Django subdomains or whatever you want to use to set the subdomains properly. And the last point in here, should we translate URLs? From my experience, it's not a good idea. Generally talking, it's never a good idea. And that is because, imagine Persian is not a Latin character language. That means you're going to have a huge Unicode strings in your URLs. And it's going to be really long and really ugly, and no one is going to understand what that link is. So it's not a good idea also for Google and for the system itself. You want to keep, because it's a multilingual site, you want to keep your absolute URLs, preferably in the main language, a Latin character language, for example, English, and then have your different URLs for the different languages. Again, you will also want to use for non-Latin languages in absolute URLs, something like IDs for the same problem, and avoiding Unicode and long URLs, and also for sharing purposes on social media and stuff. So we usually use IDs at the small media. So all of these considerations obviously depend on the specifications of the project. I would like just point a few things that you should do and you shouldn't do. I'll always think about the simplest implementation. Don't overcomplicate things. Keep your system and dependencies as simple as possible. Try to reduce complexity as much as you can whenever you can. So in that sense, add a translation approach that does not impact the core of your system. And this means add translations without changing the existing models or views. This will cause less pain if you modify your component that manages the translations in the future. And you also need to support inheritance of your models. You also will consider to store translations in the same table just to avoid expensive joins when working with big databases. That's another problem we had, and it was a really big one. Especially when migrations or in the admin where you have lists or many inline models. So in that case, you probably can build your own views or own admin. That means you need more time. And again, don't translate URLs. Apart from other things I will mention after, this does not work for non-Latin characters, as I said, yeah. So yeah, essentially having your specifications in mind, choose your right component to handle painless model translations, or write your own approach, having all of this in mind, that you want to have your component for translations a part of your main core system. there are some solutions out there that you can choose, or maybe you can not because you don't like them. I will say that the first one is model translation that is less obstructive. That means you don't need to edit your models or change anything. It works with a registration approach where you register your files and that's all about that. HBAT, you need to modify your model. And keep in mind that this does not support many Django admin features. So you won't be able, unless you actually develop that to support it, you won't be able to search fields, translated fields. And then the last one is parallel, is very similar to HBAT. It stores all translations in a separate table. That means probably expensive joins again. So again, depend on your specifications. From my personal experience, I will prefer to have them in the same table. So then query sets are much easier and faster. Obviously, you can perfection all of that, but again, think about scalability in mind. Settings, very briefly. Your local mind will have to be there, and that is after the session and before the common, all in Django docs. I won't say anything that obviously is, I think, is active by default. That's cool. And then add your languages. And you notice here the EU get text lazy. What's the difference of you get text and you get text lazy? So the first one is mainly for forms or models. The code of these definitions is only executed once, mostly on Django startup. And every time you access the name of the attributes on a model, the string will be newly translated. So you might be looking at this model in different languages since Django was started. And the other EU get text is mostly for views and function calls. So every time the view is called, will be newly executed, so you will always get the right translation fitting the request. Right, so here a simple thing, welcome to my site, and that will be collected with Django make messages command. So here's where the fun part starts, the direction. The first question is, do you really need Django admin to be right to left? That is supported, actually, but since it's a multilingual website and they need to translate, I mean, in most of the cases, it always depends on your specifications, but you probably don't. And you probably want to have just the translation side by side. They can translate if in the case that the context is linked, or you want to have just create the right to left items in a separated Django admin view where you actually can switch the direction of the form, just the form. And that means it's really annoying for them. It's not that annoying when they have a text field to write in the wrong direction for them, but is in text editors like that, they need to have the right direction. So that is quite easy to do with the settings of the text editor. You obviously need to choose one that supports right to left. CK editor, all cool. And that is the bit actually you need to just change the language. This approach will work perfectly if the the content is not linked, so the same model can be, Persian or English. They can just select the language and then change the direction and then save the item, and that's all. So some issues. Yes, I've been working with Python 2.7, but I'm migrating now, and that means a lot of issues with encoding. So you probably will get this nice one, this Unicode decode error. I got that many times, and drove me crazy, actually. So there is a really good article. I think the best article I found, which is that one if you want to check out, is Derek Dowler. It's a really good article that explains easily how you can replicate this. Obviously, I've been replicating this every day, but so you set up your variables, right? You plug in a Unicode into another Unicode that works fine, as you can see. You plug in UTF into another UTF, that works, no problem. You can plug Unicode into a UTF byte sequence, but plugging a UTF string into a Unicode doesn't work so well, and that is one of the cases where you get that nice one. So again, that's the article, if you want to write that down. If you don't want this trouble, just migrate to Python3 Solution. If some variables are byte sequences instead of Unicode objects, convert them to Unicode objects with decode before handle them. So you can see there. Python 3 solves this problem by becoming more explicit. String literals are now Unicode by default, while byte sequences are stored in a new type called byte. Dates. This is a really fun one too. So this is today, date, right? Yeah?
Exactly.
That is the Jalili calendar, the Persian calendar. That means they need to select dates like that, right? And the Django admin. So as easy as possible, you want to provide them with the tools to select that. I will recommend their widgets, date pickers that supports Halili calendar and many other different calendars, but I won't recommend that because you want to minimize your pain, right? And you will end up probably with problems. So this library specifically for Jalili calendar, and most of the cases I will just provide a drop down, day, month, and year drop downs, and then when saving, convert that with this into our calendar, Gregorian calendar. Let's talk about internationalization and URL patterns. Append a language code prefix. That's most of the cases you want to do. You also can do subdomains. So that's cool, easy. And about translating URLs, again, there's a big warning in Django docs. In most cases, it's best to use translated URLs only within a language code prefixed block of patterns using I18N patterns. This is to avoid the possibility that the translated URLs cause a collision with a non-translated URL pattern. So, generally talking, avoid translating URLs. You want to keep the same for all languages in the main language, in a Latin character language, and then serve the rest with. So cool front-end tips that we find out pretty helpful, and I hope is also for you guys. So this is simple. Yeah, you can get the current language. You can also get the direction of the current language. Actually, the get current language direction it returns true or false. So that's why you can see there if blah blah blah, RTL or LTR, right? You can also make a template tag just for illustration purposes. Here you can see that I'm selecting dynamically when the templates are rendered that append the RTL or LTR. That means you can actually use any task runner like Gulp or Webpack or whatever and compile your SASS and your JavaScript files like that, and then just selecting dynamically depending on the language. And here's some SASS good things, and really easy actually, but it's good to mention. So imagine that your app.rtl SASS file is your entry point for your Gulp to collect all of them, or Webpack, and that is where you set is right to left true. A different font size because usually they need a bigger size. And then you can import your, specific right to left styles for that language. In the other way, for English, you can, for the other direction, you can set that to false and then import your specific SASS. Easy. And here, the SASS mixins can probably decrease your development time by 50%. That means you don't have to write different styles for the two directions, right? So you can use that nicely and say include margin left value, and that will actually do just that check and apply left or right depending on the direction. So that is pretty cool and really easy to use. So yeah, that is my statement. Anyone can make the simple complicated, but creativity is making the complicated simple. Think really simple and achieve your goals, and don't be in trouble. Thank you. If you have any questions, comments, feedback.
Yeah, we do have time for about 2 questions.
So my question has to do with model translations. Have you either had the opportunity or run into any issues with translating maybe models from third-party apps that bring in migrations that you don't control? Have you I guess added model-based translations to any apps that are reusable apps that you've installed from outside the project?
It depends on your approach, right? And that's what I mean about.
So I'm using Django model translations.
You're using that, so then you can register your fields, right?
I guess so the conflict is that if we add a translation that adds migrations to add fields, but then you have migrations. But if this was a reusable app,
in that case, you probably want to extend that model, create your own inside your app, and then do the translation, right? So you import that, yeah?
Perfect. All right, one more.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. So question, and this is sort of like, this is just more about like translations in general. Like I've noticed like a lot in the last couple years that browsers are getting better at identifying that it's a different language displaying on the page, and they'll prompt you to say like, okay, hey, you know, it looks like this page is in French, but you're English. Do you want us to do the translation? And I'm wondering like how much, if you know how mature that is, and because obviously, you know, like for clients, it might it costs money to, you know, do all these translations, and that they like the idea of just having an automatic thing, and where the state of that is at.
That is probably not a good idea. You mean translation on the fly, right?
Yes, yeah, like
That is usually
Chrome
not a
or
good idea
Google.
because everyone knows that, for example, Google Translator does not translate properly, right? Especially for, you know, Arabic speakers or...
like idioms that are in the
Yeah, exactly.
language won't get
So
translated
even
properly.
English to Spanish sometimes is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a good idea for UX, from a UX perspective, you know?
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cho.
you.
If